Act 1. A Shadow in the Lover's Lane. The 1960s in America were a time of tumultuous change. A decade of cultural revolution, of vibrant social movements, and of a war that divided a nation. But away from the epicenters of protests and politics, in the quiet, sleepy towns north of San Francisco's Bay Area, life moved at a slower, more predictable pace. In places like Benicia and Vallejo, teenagers still sought out secluded spots, lovers' lanes, to steal a few moments of privacy under the vast, starry California sky. It was a timeless teenage ritual, steeped in innocence. On the night of December 20th, 1968, this innocence was shattered by an act of brutal, inexplicable violence, marking the first confirmed appearance of a phantom who would terrorize Northern California and baffle the world for decades to come. A killer who would give himself a name that would become synonymous with unsolved mystery, the Zodiac. Our story begins on Lake Herman Road, a lonely, unlit stretch of asphalt winding through the rolling hills between Benicia and Vallejo. It was a popular spot for local kids. On that cold December night, two high school students, David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were on their first date. They parked their Rambler station wagon in a gravel turnout, a spot well known to local sweethearts. They were simply two kids enjoying a moment, their future stretching out before them, bright and full of promise. They had no idea they were being watched. Another car pulled into the turnout beside them. The driver got out and approached their vehicle. What happened next was a blur of methodical violence. The killer first shot David Faraday in the head at point-blank range as he was exiting the car. Betty Lou Jensen, in a desperate bid for her life, managed to open her door and run. She didn't get far. The killer pursued her, shooting her 5 times in the back. There was no robbery, no apparent motive. It was a cold, execution-style murder. The killer then got back in his car and drove away, melting into the darkness. The sheer randomness of the crime stunned the local community and the Solano County Sheriff's Office. There were no witnesses, no discernible reason for the attack. Investigators were left with a few shell casings and a profound sense of unease. The case was a brutal, frustrating dead end. For months, an anxious quiet settled over the region. The tragic murder of 2 teenagers remained a local mystery, a ghost story whispered among high school students. But the ghost was not finished. He was merely waiting for his next opportunity to kill. That opportunity came 7 months later, on the 4th of July, 1969. The location was Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, another well-known lover's lane, just a few miles from the first crime scene. Darlene Farron, 22, and her friend Michael Majo, 19, were sitting in her Corvair when another car pulled up behind them, its headlights blinding them. The car drove away, but returned a few minutes later, parking once again behind them. A man exited the vehicle, holding a flashlight and a 9mm pistol. He walked directly to the passenger side window and, without saying a word, opened fire. He emptied his gun into the car, shooting both Darlene and Michael multiple times. Then, as calmly as he had arrived, he walked back to his car and began to drive away. Michael Majo, despite being shot in the face, neck, and chest, was still alive. In agony, he began to scream. Hearing the screams, the killer stopped his car, got out, and walked back. He fired 2 more shots at each of them before finally driving off into the night. Darlene Farron was pronounced dead at the hospital. Miraculously, Michael Majo survived. He would become the first person to see the killer's face, however briefly, and lived to tell the tale. He described a short, heavy-set white male with a large face. It was the first concrete description of the phantom. The killer, however, was not content to let the police control the narrative. 40 minutes after the attack, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. The caller's voice was calm, monotone, and chilling. He spoke in a rehearsed-sounding manner. He said, "I want to report murder." "No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of the park headquarters. They were in a brown car. I use a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. You'll find them on Lake Herman Road. I am the murderer." Then he said something that would echo through the decades. "Goodbye." This was a new kind of terror. The killer was not just a murderer. He was a performer who craved an audience. He wanted to communicate, to taunt, to take credit for his work. and he was about to escalate his performance in a way no one could have predicted. On July 31st, 1969, 3 identical letters arrived at the offices of 3 different newspapers: the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. The letters were a shocking confession. The author claimed responsibility for both the Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs attacks. He provided details that only the killer could know, proving his claim was genuine. But the letters contained something far more sinister. Each letter contained 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram, a cipher. The killer demanded that the newspapers publish his coded message on their front pages. If they failed to do so by the following Friday afternoon, he threatened to go on a weekend killing rampage and murder a dozen people. And at the end of the letter, for the first time, he gave himself a name. He signed off with a cross-circle symbol, a symbol that would become an icon of terror. He had declared himself. The Zodiac Killer had been born. Act 2, the game of ciphers and fear. The arrival of the Zodiac's letters to the Bay Area into a state of panic and morbid fascination. The newspapers, faced with a terrifying ethical dilemma, chose to publish the ciphers. The story became a national sensation. The Zodiac was no longer a local menace. He was a media superstar, a puzzle-making monster who had turned his reign of terror into a public game. The FBI was called in to assist, but even their top cryptographers were initially stumped by the complex code. The challenge, however, was taken up by an ordinary couple, a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife, Betty, working at their kitchen table. They obsessed over the strange symbols, and in less than a week, they did what the FBI could not. They cracked the 408 cipher. The world held its breath, waiting for the decoded message to reveal the killer's identity or his motives. The reality was far more disturbing. The message was a rambling, misspelled, and grammatically bizarre monologue. It read, in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. The best part of it is THA. When I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all THE I have killed will become my slaves." The message revealed a mind that was not just evil, but deeply disordered. A killer who believed he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. His identity, however, remained a secret. Just as the public was reeling from this revelation, the Zodiac sent another letter, this time directly to the San Francisco Examiner. It began with a chillingly casual phrase, "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." It was the first time he had used the name in writing. He seemed to be reveling in his newfound celebrity, providing more details about the murders to prove he was the real deal. He was an artist, and he demanded his work be appreciated. The Zodiac was not content with just writing letters. He wanted to kill again. His next attack was his most audacious and theatrical yet. On the afternoon of September 27th, 1969, 2 college students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were picnicking on a secluded peninsula at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. A man approached them, emerging from behind the trees. His appearance was utterly bizarre and terrifying. He was wearing a dark, hooded executioner's costume, with the Zodiac's cross-circle symbol stitched on the chest. His face was concealed by a bag, with dark sunglasses clipped over the eye holes. He was holding a gun. He told the couple he was an escaped convict from a prison in Montana and needed their car and money to get to Mexico. He seemed calm, almost polite. He had Cecilia tie up Brian with pre-cut lengths of rope. Then he tied her up himself. The couple, terrified but compliant, believed it was just a robbery, but the killer's intentions were far darker. After tying them, he calmly told them, "I'm going to have to stab you people." He then pulled out a long double-edged knife and brutally stabbed them both, again and again. Brian Hartnell was stabbed 6 times in the back, Cecilia Shepard 10 times. After the savage attack, the killer took a black marker and walked over to Hartnell's car. On the car door, he drew his cross-circle symbol and wrote the dates of his previous attacks, along with a chilling message. Vallejo, December 20th, 68, July 4th, 69, September 27th, 69, 6:30 by knife. He then walked away, leaving the two students for dead. He drove to a payphone in downtown Napa, and just as he had done after the Blue Rock Springs attack, he called the police to report his own crime. "I want to report a murder." "No, a double murder," he told the dispatcher, his voice eerily calm. "They are at Lake Berryessa." He then added, "I'm the one that did it." Miraculously, Brian Hartnell survived his horrific injuries. Cecilia Shepard fought for her life for 2 days before succumbing in the hospital. Hartnell was able to give police a detailed account of the attack and the killer's strange costume, an image that would be forever burned into the public consciousness. The Zodiac was a real-life supervillain, a costumed killer who treated his murders as performance art. His final confirmed murder occurred just 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, in the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. A cab driver named Paul Stine picked up a passenger. A few blocks later, the passenger shot Stine in the back of the head, killing him instantly. The killer then took Stine's wallet and keys and, most disturbingly, tore off a piece of Stine's blood-soaked shirt. 3 teenagers in a house across the street witnessed the aftermath and called the police. The initial police dispatch mistakenly reported the suspect as a black male. When 2 officers arrived on the scene, they saw a heavy-set white male walking away from the cab. Believing he was not the suspect, they simply asked him if he had seen anything, and then let him go. It was a disastrous mistake. They had, in all likelihood, spoken directly to the Zodiac Killer and let him walk away into the night. A few days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter. It began, this is the Zodiac speaking, "I am the murderer of the taxi driver." To prove his claim, the envelope contained a piece of Paul Stine's bloody shirt. The letter was filled with more taunts, mocking the police for their incompetence and their failure to catch him. He ended the letter with a new threat, one that terrified the entire city. He claimed he was now going to target children, that his next victims would be school children on a school bus. The threat, though never carried out, created a wave of unprecedented fear. Police motorcades began escorting school buses, and parents across the Bay Area lived in a state of constant dread. The Zodiac had proven he could kill anyone, anywhere, at any time. Act 3, The Unending Mystery. After murder Paul Stine, the Zodiac's reign of terror entered a new, and perhaps even more frustrating, phase. The physical attacks seemed to stop, but the psychological warfare continued. He kept writing letters, sending more ciphers, and making cryptic threats. He sent a greeting card to Chronicle journalist Paul Avery, who was covering the case extensively. He sent a letter claiming responsibility for the disappearance of a woman years earlier, a claim that was never substantiated. He mailed a new, even more complex 340-symbol cipher, which will remain unsolved for over 51 years. Each letter was a media event, a fresh injection of fear into the public consciousness. He was an expert at keeping his own dark legend alive. The investigation became one of the largest in California history. Thousands of suspects were interviewed and cleared. The letters and envelopes were analyzed for fingerprints and DNA, but the technology of the era yielded few results. The Zodiac was a ghost, a series of taunting letters and a mysterious symbol, but not a man of flesh and blood that could be identified. Over the years, a number of compelling suspects emerged, each with their own set of circumstantial evidence. The most famous was Arthur Lee Allen, a former schoolteacher who was fired for misconduct with students. He was identified by the Blue Rock Springs survivor, Michael Mageau, years later. He owned the same type of typewriter used in some of the Zodiac letters. He wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch. He lived in Vallejo and worked near the location of the first attacks. The evidence seemed strong, but it was never conclusive. His fingerprints and DNA did not match the partial samples the police had. Allen, who died in 1992, has always remained the prime suspect in the eyes of many, but the case against him was never strong enough to prosecute. Other suspects have been proposed over the years by amateur and professional investigators alike. There was Richard Gaikowski, a newspaper editor. There was Lawrence Kane, a career criminal. Each new book and documentary seemed to propose a new name, a new theory. The Zodiac case became a cultural obsession, a modern myth. It was the ultimate whodunit, a puzzle that begged to be solved. The years rolled on. The 1970s gave way to the 80s, then the 90s. The investigators grew old and retired. The witnesses' memories faded. The Zodiac case became the quintessential American cold case, a testament to the fact that sometimes evil can simply get away. But the obsession never died. In the internet age, a new generation of amateur detectives, web sleuths, took up the cause. Online forums buzzed with theories and analysis of the ciphers. The case was kept alive not by law enforcement, but by a global community of the curious and the obsessed. One of the most prominent figures in this modern era of the investigation was a true crime writer named Michelle McNamara. She became consumed by the case of the Golden State Killer, who, for a time, was thought by some to possibly be the Zodiac as well. Her posthumously published book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, reignited public interest in these massive unsolved California cases and played a role in the eventual capture of the Golden State Killer through genetic genealogy. For a time, it seemed this new technology might finally unmask the Zodiac as well. But the DNA evidence from the Zodiac case was far more limited and contaminated, making a genealogical search nearly impossible. The ghost remained a ghost. Then, in December of 2020, a breakthrough, the infamous 340 cipher, which had stumped the greatest minds of the FBI and NSA for over half a century, was finally solved. It was not cracked by law enforcement, but by a team of 3 amateur codebreakers from around the world. David Orenchak, a web designer from Virginia, Sam Blake, a mathematician from Australia, and Jarl van Eyck, a programmer from Belgium. After years of work and running complex computer programs, they found the key. The world waited once again, hoping the message would finally reveal the killer's name. But the Zodiac, even from beyond the grave, offered only more taunts and psychological games. The decoded message read in part, I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me. It was the same rambling, egotistical, and chilling voice from 50 years earlier. No name, no clues, just a final, defiant boast of a killer who knew he would never be caught. Act 4, the enduring legend. Today, the Zodiac case remains officially open in several California jurisdictions. It is a puzzle without a solution, a story without an ending. The taunting letters have stopped. The killer himself is almost certainly dead, but his legend endures. He has become a fixture in popular culture, the subject of countless books, documentaries, and major motion pictures. He is the archetype of the brilliant, puzzle-making killer, a real-life Riddler who terrorized a city and then vanished into thin air. But behind the legend, behind the ciphers and the costumes, lies a tragic and very real human cost. The story of the Zodiac is not just about the killer. It is about David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein. They were real people with lives and futures that were stolen from them in acts of senseless, brutal violence. Their families have lived for over half a century without answers, without justice. The Zodiac Killer represents a unique kind of terror. It's the fear of the unknown. He was not just a murderer. He was a question mark. His identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. Was he a brilliant, calculating genius, or just a lucky, pathetic loser who craved attention? Was he one of the known suspects, or someone whose name has never been mentioned? We may never know. The cross-circle symbol remains, a chilling icon of a time when a phantom haunted the lovers' lanes and quiet streets of Northern California. He was a ghost who wrote letters, a monster who created puzzles, and a killer who, in the end, kept his greatest secret for himself. He is a testament to a dark and unsettling truth. Some stories don't have an ending, and some ghosts are never caught.